Continuing on this Thursday episode, we're all kind of holding our breath, finding out what's going to happen with the Trump verdict. I wanted to bring on our legal eagle, Arthur Aidala, who's one of the most prominent attorneys in America. Of course, he's New York City based, loves the city, and a lot of people are looking at what's happening in this Manhattan courtroom with Donald Trump, and we're asking the $64,000 question. Is this a New York thing? I mean, some of the stuff we're hearing is so bizarre and so peculiar. So the one and only Arthur Aidala, star of stage, screen, radio, podcast. I mean, I saw you set Maggie Haberman straight the other night on CNN. You're becoming ubiquitous, my man.
Well, I mean, Mike, being absolutely transparent. I mean, this is exactly what I do. I mean, this is the courthouse I grew up in. My father was an assistant district attorney in that courthouse.
Yep. Back
in the 60s and the 70s. I most recently tried the Harvey Weinstein case in there. I tried, the Abe Hirschfeld case in there. It's my ballywick. So 32 years doing something, you got to get a little bit right on how things work inside the courthouse.
When you told me the other day, when you were on the show and you said that the two rappers who appeared with Trump at the huge rally happened to be your clients because they're facing a litany of charges, I almost fell off the chair, right?
Yeah, well, believe me, I almost fell off the chair when I saw them at the rally. How about that? I was like, what are you guys doing? But, they especially Chef G, who's the guy who's like, he's the more prominent of the two.
Yes.
He's just like, look, I genuinely believe that Trump would be a better president for the United States of America.
Well, it's a symbol of this shifting support. I mean, Biden is hemorrhaging black voters. Trump seems to be, there are polls saying he's got 20% support among black voters in America, which is unprecedented for a Republican candidate.
Yeah, well, look, let's see how this case turns out and what effect, if any, it's going to have. I would imagine it's going to have some sort of an effect, and I think both ways. I actually think if Trump gets convicted, I think it's going to push people to say, this was total BS. You know what? I am going to vote for the guy, and I think other people are going to say, look, I cannot have the president of the United States convicted felon. It just doesn't look right. So, there's a lot riding on this verdict. Let me just clear some, maybe misconceptions and how things work. If there was one thing I would change, and there are many, but if there was one thing I would change about the jury system, it is the fact that the jurors, in any case, do not get to bring the jury instructions into the jury room.
Well, and I'm glad you brought this up, because there was an attorney, even on CNN of all places, who seemed shocked at how Merchan handled these jury instructions. They've got to be overwhelmed. The lawyer on CNN said to have all of these instructions read to them without getting a copy. They weren't allowed to bring a copy of the lengthy jury instructions with them into the deliberation room. Is that unprecedented, or is that SOP?
I think the lawyer you're talking about is Ellie Honig, who actually has become a friend of mine. And he was a federal prosecutor for a long time. And the reason why he's so shocked is in federal court, so we were a block away in the courthouse where the E. Jean Carroll thing went on.
Right.
The jurors do get to bring the jury instructions into the courtroom. But in state court, in any court in the state of New York, typically you don't. I don't know if a judge has the ability to overrule the rules, but I have never had a judge put the jury instructions in the jury room, and I think it's ridiculous because it is so much to throw at the jury. And I don't know statistically if I'm correct, but I think every case that I've had, the jury has always sent out a note asking for clarification of at least some part of the jury instruction.
Got it.
And it's often, Judge, please explain what a reasonable doubt is. And the judge just goes back to his 3-ring binder and reads what basically boilerplate jury instructions.
Well, Jonathan Turley over at Fox News said the fact that yesterday the jurors asked for some clarification on one part of the instructions, I guess, Professor Turley believes that's good. That bodes well for the defense and does not bode well for the prosecution.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully disagree because you have to take it as a whole. And they also asked for David Pecker's testimony, and he may have been the best witness for the prosecution. They thought so. The prosecution thought so because they put him on first. And as they say, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and he was their first impression. And he's the one who corroborates the best Michael Cohen and that initial meeting about, paying off Stormy and how the payoffs were going to go, et cetera.
Right,
so,
right.
I'm going to tell the professor, as much as I respect his opinion sometimes, that I've probably tried more cases in 100 Center Street than he has.
Arthur,
if it comes to reading tea leaves, maybe I'm in a better position.
No, you are. You are definitely. This is in your wheelhouse, and that's why we're grateful you could spend a few minutes with us, because we're talking, of course, with Arthur Aidala, host of the Arthur Aidala Power Hour on AM 970, The Answer in New York City, and again all over the place these days, Inside Edition and at Fox and CNN and everywhere, because this speaks right to what you've spent your life dedicated to doing. Help us understand this announcement that Mershon told the jury that they do not need to be unanimous to convict. That's a principle. I always thought that was a constitutional principle. According to reporting, 4 could agree on one crime because, Trump's only charged with 1,970.
Michael, let me. I hate to interrupt the host, especially Mike Gallagher, but let me just break it down for you. So, because I don't want you to say anything that's not accurate.
Okay.
He didn't say you don't need to be unanimous. What he said was you need to be unanimous on the falsification of business records. But the prosecutor has to prove it's falsification of business records to commit another crime.
Right.
What he said you do not have to be unanimous on is what that other crime is. So you all have to say that Donald Trump acted in a way that he was and was aided and abetted, and that's the part that hurts him. Like people colloquially speak to it as conspiracy. So Donald Trump doesn't have to do everything; he can act with others, and that's a big problem for him because basically he's responsible for other people's actions, like Weisselberg and Michael Cohen. So the government has to prove that Trump acted with these other people to come up with this scheme to create false business records. But it's got to be – that's just a misdemeanor. That's dead. It's barred by the statute of limitations. The only way it comes back to life is if it's in the process of committing another felony. And that other felony is what the judge said you do not have to be unanimous on. So 4 of you could say they falsified business records to commit tax fraud by submitting a fake 1099. 4 of you could say the falsification of business records was to thwart federal election laws, which is breaking a law, even though it's a federal law, not a state law. And 4 of you could come up with any other reason you want, any other crime you could think of. And so on the underlying crime, you do not have to be unanimous. And I just think that's wrong because this is – people relate it to a burglary count. And a burglary count in the state of New York is basically a trespass to commit a crime therein. So there, the prosecutor has to prove that, yes, you were in someone's house and you weren't allowed to be, and you were there to commit a crime. But they don't have to prove that you were there to steal from someone or to assault someone or to sexually assault somebody. But the difference is that crime is not beyond the statute of limitations. Here, you have crimes that are beyond their statute of limitations. So in my opinion, not only do they need to be unanimous about the falsification of the business records, but they should also be unanimous about why they were falsifying the business records to get over this tremendous hurdle, this Mount Everest-sized hurdle to cast the statute of limitations aside, which is there to protect all American citizens. And Judge Mershon, because this is a case of first impression, a case like this has never been done before, he has decided that on that second element, so they have to be unanimous on the falsification of business records, but he said you don't have to be unanimous about why they falsified the business records.
You know, you mentioned the unprecedented nature of this. Most of us, or many of us, believe this is a politically motivated prosecution, that a conviction is going to be appealed. And a lot of legal analysts have suggested there are many appealable mistakes that have been made by Judge Merchan. Do you share that view? Do you hold the view, based on what you've seen thus far, that much of this, that if he does get convicted, if Trump does get convicted, that Merchan has made mistakes galore, and that this thing will be thrown out on appeal?
Okay, so based on my experience of I just had a very big case where the next level of appeal is the appellate division. They unanimously, 5-0, said that the trial judge that I appeared before did everything right. And then I went up to the Court of Appeals, and there they were like, what are you talking about? No, this was a disaster. And they reversed the case.
Right.
So I don't know how much confidence I have in the next level of the appellate court, because I was just burned by them. And luckily, the Court of Appeals fixed it, which is the highest court of the state of New York. Judge Merchan did not make a ton of mistakes. He did not make the type of mistakes that were made in the case I'm referring to. I think the overall case is appealable, which you never say that before. Like, he's charged with murder, he's charged with rape, he's charged with robbery, he's charged with burglary. Like, okay, we know those are crimes. Here, I don't know, this whole concept of two out of the statute of limitations misdemeanors being joined together to create a felony.
Right. That
concept has never been done before. That in and of itself, the DA brought it, so they made the mistake, and the judge said, yeah, it's okay. So now I think he made a mistake. I would hope that the appellate court has the chutzpah to say, we're not going to start bringing, because we don't like somebody, whether it be Donald Trump or some other public enemy number one in a certain locale, we're not going to start creating laws, throwing out statute of limitations, saying, if you put two things together, it equals something that's never been equaled before. So I really do not know if that, I hope they have the guts to do so. When you talk about, Mike, whether this is political, as I mentioned, I basically was raised around that building. I never saw the scene like I saw 2 days ago on Tuesday when Robert De Niro was there. And, obviously I'm going to exaggerate, but it seemed like there were millions of reporters around him.
Right.
And then when he walked away from the podium, Menendez is on trial right down the block. There's not that political thing hanging over his trial. His is like, hey, did this guy take bribes to cast a vote a certain way? Like, that's a real case.
Right.
I don't care if he's Democrat or he's a Republican. Did an elected official take bribes to vote a certain way?
And we understand what that crime, what he's accused of. I'm sick of hearing people say we're not even really sure what the secondary crime is that Trump is supposedly guilty of, because Bragg is evidently making the big picture argument that there was an interference with an election because he was trying to hide the non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels. How in the world do you ever determine that in a court of law?
And you know what I said? I said I was on with Megyn Kelly actually yesterday. I said, let's just say before Trump was running for president, some guy showed his head up and said, Trump, you owe me $150,000 for work I did in one of your buildings. And Trump knows he didn't do the work.
Right.
But he pays him off anyway.
Right.
And doesn't tell anybody about it. So the guy was going to say, if you don't pay me, I'm going to tell everyone you're a deadbeat.
Right.
So now Trump pays the money, and it does it the way that Michael Cohen did it. Is he still guilty of some concocted crime? Because he got it. Look, no one has the guts to use the word extortion. But Stormy Daniels was basically in a backroom way extorting him.
Of course.
That's what it was. Pay me money. And so, yes, he did it in a way that no one was going to see. But when you pay someone for their silence, on a BS claim. You don't want everybody to know that you paid them. I mean, that's the reason why you're paying them.
That's
It's
right.
keep it quiet.
That's exactly. The whole thing is a disgrace. It's disgusting. And let's see how the American people respond to it. But boy, are we grateful for you, especially Mr. Media Superstar these days, making the rounds. I'm so honored that you could pull yourself away from Megyn Kelly and CNN and Fox and everybody to spend a few minutes with little old Mike Gallagher and his audience.
Yeah, little old Mike Gallagher. What is it? The number three biggest radio show on the planet.
Number nine, but who's counting? All right, Arthur Aidala, the Arthur Aidala Power Hour. You're the best. Keep fighting the good fight. We'll chat again soon, my friend.